Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. Mayor Bloomberg may be the mayor of New York City, but for me, and she doesn't like me to say this, Elizabeth Berger is the mayor of Lower Manhattan. She's lived downtown for a long time, and earlier this year, she became the president of the Alliance for Downtown New York. And she's my guest today, and welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I'm glad you're here. You've lived downtown since I've known you. How long have you lived downtown?
I have lived below Fulton Street for 26 years.
26 years. Were you one of the first people to move there?
Well, I was in the first wave of about 10,000 iconoclasts who moved downtown because the buildings were big and the streets were small and we were close to the water, but we didn't know our neighbors because we didn't have a neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's a lot different now.
And were you in a building that had other tenants? How did you go about doing this? That's what I don't understand.
I think the history of downtown is the history of change, and of course we have to remember that Lower Manhattan was the first live-work community, 1609, the Dutch.
It's the great history of the city, isn't
environment, the mercantilism. Downtown is where the theaters were, it's where the newspapers were, so people have always lived downtown. And in fact, even after residential life had really moved uptown, in the 60s, there was a whole new wave with the two Mitchell-Lama developments, Southbridge and Independence Plaza. But there were residential conversions of old
Battery Park
buildings.
City.
Battery Park City, of course, in the 70s, primarily for young folks who lived on Wall Street. I was a young folk, I didn't live on Wall Street. And I looked for what all New Yorkers wanted, and in fact, New Yorkers of my generation felt was their birthright.
Yeah.
Rent stabilization and a doorman. And that's what I found.
Now, it's very different. Tell us what it is.
Well, it's very different. And let's start with the statistics. There are now 50,000 people living below Chambers Street, and we believe there will be almost 60,000 by the end of the year. We are a 24/7 community. We have retail, we have restaurants, and of course we are the public transit capital of this city, if not the world. 14 subway lines. I don't want to tell you how many bus lines.
Yeah.
I think the difference, though, is qualitative. It's not quantitative. It's that there really is a sense of community. And I should say that that's something that the Alliance really started. It started with the idea that residential would support commercial. It started with incentives like 421G that really led the conversion of architecturally significant but obsolete office buildings into residential. And of course, it's always about public institutions like schools.
When did it start? Under whose administration did it start?
Well, the theory was under Dinkins, the practice was under Giuliani.
It was the business, the bids.
It was the seminal plan, the 1993 Plan for Lower Manhattan, that was conceived of and supported by the Downtown Lower Manhattan Association. And
Which was like a Chamber of Commerce.
Well, I think we should stop for 2 minutes and just say that David Rockefeller really was the visionary for downtown when he convinced Chase to build Chase Manhattan Plaza in 1958. Wall Street was already losing ground to Midtown, and he started many visionary civic associations to keep the there. The Downtown Lower Manhattan Association, of which I'm also president, this is a 2-for-1, started it, and the Department of City Planning did a plan in 1993 that said many things, but in some ways the most radical thing it said was residential will support commercial. The way we keep Wall Street is by creating a live-work community. Boy, was that prescient when you look at gas prices today.
Yeah,
the value added of a highly educated workforce that can walk to work is incredible.
Did you, do you have the support systems, the food stores?
Well, and I want to talk again about the Alliance. The Alliance paved the way for grocery stores in Lower Manhattan. Certainly, let's go back to 1982. When I moved there, you did your shopping wherever you were. And one challenge we have today is that the mindset of longtime Lower Manhattan residents is to leave. It's almost as if we have an implant that says, go northwest. I think that's less true of new residents, but of course the new developments include everything from the Fresh Direct lockers to the concierges. But the Alliance in the late 1990s realized that the key issue for the growing residential population was a grocery store, and they solicited voluntary contributions from several of the residential developers, and they created a 5-year subsidy for the Amish market. which was at that time on Washington and Cedar. And it was true, if you build it, they will come, because now there are many, many other food markets. We have Whole Foods, which I guess is the branding of a successful residential community, coming right outside the bid to Warren Street in July. And we have lots of choices.
Have they added any affordable housing? Is it mostly luxury housing, market rate housing?
I was going to say affordable to who? I
right.
think
affordable to the people who work there, I guess, and attractive to other
I think we have to say that the anchors of the community are two Mitchell-Amas, Southbridge and Independence Plaza.
Independence Plaza, was that going private again? Were they buying it out?
I think there is a plan in place. There's also, remember, there is
Independence Plaza is on the west.
Right, heavily stabilized in some of the older buildings in Battery Park City, as well as some 80-20 buildings.
Right.
I think from our perspective, housing is housing. And what we are is value at every price point.
It's getting like, it's basically very similar to Manhattan, because Manhattan itself is...
Well, our goal is to be no different than the rest of Manhattan.
So I wish we could all be a little different.
And I say that as a long-term resident.
Yeah. It's a very interesting kind of phenomena that has gone on. It's always busy, right? It's not empty at night.
It is not empty at night, but it's safe at night. There's action, there's activity.
I remember when...
There are baby carriages on Wall Street, and for me...
That's the indication.
Well, that's a sign that what we've really done is create a new model of a business district.
Right, that's true. Is the stock exchange never moved?
Stock exchange is still there.
Is there still discussion about moving it?
Not
really.
Not recently. Not that, I hope not. But what we are doing, Ronnie, is diversifying the economy. So we are the financial services sector. We are the fourth largest commercial central business district in the United States after Midtown, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. I think we'll probably move up the list once the 10 million square feet on the World Trade Center come back online. But we also are increasingly a professional services center. Media is moving in, creative services, and that's really important because Wall Street is now a metaphor. Wall Street not only doesn't have to be on Wall Street, it doesn't have to be any place with trading increasingly electronic. So while we very much want financial services companies to stay downtown, we're excited that JP Morgan Chase is still committed to Site 5. We're excited.
What's Site 5?
On the World Trade Center site, it's where 130 Liberty is right now, while we're excited by the prospect that was reported last week of Merrill Lynch staying downtown, perhaps in Tower 3. It's not just about financial services. It's about the residents that support them, the professional services that support them, and other industries that create the scalable community in 1 square mile.
The Alliance actually does what? It's charged with certain specific responsibilities.
Well, we are the largest business improvement district in North America. People often ask me, why don't you say the world? It's because I know North America. And business improvement districts are highly regulated nonprofits. We're tax assessing entities created pursuant to state and local law, and we collect an increment, I think it's now 17.2 cents per square foot on top of commercial property tax. We have...
So the more the real estate goes up, the more money you have to spend?
Well, no, because our assessment is fixed, as is our rate. And unlike many business improvement districts, we've only gone back twice since our incorporation 14 years ago to the City Council for an increase, as a matter of fact. But we have a contract with the city to provide supplemental services, sanitation, public safety, transportation, and if you are downtown, you'll see our Goodwill ambassadors in the red jackets. You'll see our guys and our women in red jumpsuits with sanitation barrels, with snow cleaners in the parks.
And they do residential as well as commercial?
They do what you see.
And does the city sanitation also come in?
Well, supplemental services are supplemental. Absolutely. We support what the city does. We also, in the area of transportation, we run a free shuttle. We had 800,000 people riding our free bus.
Where does it go?
Right now it's a loop that goes from the top of Battery Park City all the way down around the bottom of the Battery and up to South Street Seaport. We have some ideas about potentially expanding that. And I think the value added that we're providing really supports the residential. We also are the #1 source of original and synthesized economic and demographic research on Lower Manhattan. Free on our website to all. We do events from lecture series to concerts. We create networking opportunities for small businesses. We advocate for economic development. We have an award-winning construction mitigation program that uses construction sites as public art and architecture projects. What else do we do?
You do the streetscapes, the signs.
We do.
What do you do about newspaper distribution?
And the light posts.
Yeah.
We also are getting back in the planning business and the vision business and trying to figure out what Lower Manhattan will look like and should look like once the last truck pulls away from the World Trade Center site.
Now, let's talk about the World Trade Center. You lived there when that happened.
I live a block away. I still do.
Yeah, and it was a total, trauma to the world, so obviously to the people who lived there. What percentage of people came back or stayed?
Well, I don't want to minimize the trauma, and of course, that 3,000 people died a block from my home, and that they died, period, is a terrible thing. As I say to my kids, 25,000 people didn't die that day, but of course 3,000 people did.
Do they remember it?
Oh.
Yeah. How old were they?
6 and 2.5. But what I think was so hard that day for me about the World Trade Center is that it was our whole community gone in 18 minutes. Right. The World Trade Center was the center of our life.
Yeah.
It was the community institution. It was the indoor play space. It was our market. It was our performance space. It was where my kids learned to walk. It was, I shouldn't say this, but where they learned to ride bikes. And it was really the center of our universe. And one of the challenges in rebuilding it is how to recreate that center of the universe, respecting security issues, but also understanding that rebuilding is really a tribute to the living and how to balance all the concerns. One of the things the Alliance fought very hard for was to keep not only Cortlandt Street open, but to reopen the grid, to make Greenwich Street go all the way through, to make Fulton Street go all the way through. These are really important. They're not only important design principles, they're really important to our commercial tenants. Right. The transportation projects associated.
Obviously.
They're about life.
Right.
They're about life.
It's very confusing when you don't live down there and you haven't followed it totally with the museum, the memorial.
It's very confusing when you have followed it totally.
The memorial, has that been settled?
The memorial seems to be on track. The mayor has done an excellent job with the Memorial Foundation of raising the money. There's a fantastic curator who was last at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, who is really dedicated to telling an interpretive story of that day that is kind of beyond the classic
memorial
and kind of story of heroes. Yeah. I think there are many issues that are yet to be resolved, and one of the challenges I think that the Memorial Foundation has is to understand who the audience is and who needs to be remembered.
So is the audience the families of the victims?
Well, let's hope that it...
Or, as you said, the community.
Well,
let's hope it's the community.
Let's hope that it's inclusive.
Right.
Let's hope that it's inclusive. And I think that's important on every level, on the symbolic level, on the spiritual level, and also on the practical level. One of the challenges we have downtown is we are where history began in New York. We have an unbelievable collection of destinations that people come to visit and then they leave. We want to get them connected. We want people coming to Federal Hall to also go shopping. We want people going to the Statue of Liberty also to have something to eat.
It is amazing. I mean, it was the first capital of the United States, and it's also the scene of the worst disaster we've ever had on the ground. It's really quite amazing.
Dramatic.
And the resurgence of it afterwards certainly speaks to the spirit of everybody. So that's what, basically, we've just decided what the memorial should be. The towers.
To make people go broad and deep, yes, right. The towers.
Did I read that the Port Authority is paying Silverstein how much money a day because it's late in preparing the sites?
You know, that's what's happening. I have to say we're all very excited downtown by the governor's new choice as executive director, Chris Ward.
Yeah.
He's a real take charge guy. We think he's going to be terrific.
Familiar with the city and everything else.
Which is not to say that previous executive directors didn't inherit an incredibly tough series of challenges.
I think that's the most outrageous thing I've ever heard of when I read that. I could not believe that. I'm sorry, I can say it, but you can't.
It is, you know, from my perspective, it is what it is, and what we need to do is move forward.
So how much money does Silverstein get each day?
You know, I don't know.
It's a lot of money. All right, I'll have to find out. I'll tell the audience another time.
Towers 2, 3, and 4 are underway. The Freedom Tower is underway. The PATH station has been moved so that Calatrava can begin. These are very important things. New challenges, really old challenges. 130 Liberty has to come down. Fitterman Hall has to come down. I find it hard to believe that we are going to...
That's part of the Lower Manhattan Community College.
Of BMCC. Yeah. It's right next to Seven World Trade. Larry Silverstein has built an architecturally significant skyscraper and rented it up in the time that we can't get Fitterman Hall down. It's got to come down.
What is the problem there?
I think there have been issues of ownership, there have been issues of insurance, there have been issues of remediation. I think they're all resolved. Now is the time there's a beautiful new design. Now is the time for it all to come down.
Now, there is a Lower Manhattan Development Corporation, right?
There is,
that's not you.
No, that's a state agency that is the recipient and manager of the $20 billion in HUD funds and has jurisdiction over the site and the site plan.
And do you work with them closely?
We do. We do. We hope they listen. Yeah. We certainly are respectful of them.
Are they
We're the
part
recipient.
of the community? Do they have the same ties that you have with the community?
Well, you know, we're very different organizations.
You're different, but they're planning for development down there, right? Or are they so limited that they're not really interfering?
You know, I don't want to speak for LMDC, but to a certain extent, the bulk of their planning work is done. Okay. They have been focused on the site and certain areas directly to the south and directly to the north of it. They have made some decisions, and they have a board that has mayoral as well as gubernatorial appointees. The chair of the community board sits on that board. They have a very specific mandate. Mm-hmm. Could they move faster? That would be great. We have a much broader mandate. We're a private not-for-profit. Our board is composed of people who live, work, and have a tremendous stake in the future of this community. They helped create this community. Bank of New York Mellon, the original bank in New York, JP Morgan Chase. We have many of the residential and commercial developers and property owners on our board. We have many of the major commercial tenants. We have residents. We're really about connection, about defining this notion of a 21st century business district. And it's very exciting. It's very exciting.
Yeah, and very appropriate at this time, especially with the gas prices and reliance on it. There are families moving who live there, and more families, I think, every day moving there. You've got the beautiful parks and everything else. What happens with the schools?
Well, I want to tell you about the schools because, of course, the experience of Tribeca, PS 234, is that the school makes the community. The good news is that we have...
PS 234 is on...
It's on Greenwich and Chambers, right outside of the bid, but all of the families who live in the bid feed into it. We have 3 public elementary schools in Lower Manhattan. PS 234, PS 89, which is in Battery Park City, and PS 150, which is in Independence Plaza. And I should say, one of the great hallmarks of the success of the Bloomberg administration is that the multi-million-dollar large floor plate condos in Tribeca and the financial district are all advertised as PS 234. We have a tremendous overcrowding problem. The good news, 2 new schools in the pipeline. The bad news, there's a 3-year gap and there's no plan for dealing with the overcrowding. Where's the infrastructure? Where's the infrastructure to support the development that we've all worked so hard to achieve? And that is really approaching crisis proportion. And what's going to happen? Well, I think the good news
is that with the Department of Education, is there still a school construction authority separate?
There's a school construction authority. There's a Department of Education. We have a situation in Lower Manhattan where there is a waiting list of people eligible for seats in a zoned school. The way things happen in Lower Manhattan, schools don't get built without development projects. That is the story of each of those 3, and it's the story of the new school on the east side and the story of the new school in Battery Park City. And of course, those are complicated timetables. But the issue is really, where is the Department of Ed on the interim plan?
How much do you know what it costs to build a new school?
You know, I think it really depends.
Yeah.
And they vary by size.
Idea. Are they in millions or billions? Do you know?
I think they're in millions. I
have a suggestion that I just discovered that Larry Silverstein gets $300,000 a day from the Port Authority, which means almost $12 million. So it would be a very nice gesture, his civic responsibility for him to donate that money and build a school. How about that? Why don't you suggest that to him?
Well, I'll certainly take it back to Larry.
Anyway.
I'm not so sure at the moment, I'm not so sure that the issue is money. I think it's really an issue at this moment of logistics planning, and it's really an issue of temporary space in our community.
With all the building and everything, there must be some space, and there's certainly ways if you're committed to it that you can do it. Let me ask you a question that's totally kind of related. There's been a lot of talk about sexism lately with this presidential campaign. Here you are, a young woman, running this organization with all these major corporations and businesses. How do you feel?
Well, you know, the challenge that I felt in seeking this position and in my first few months there was not overcoming being a woman. It was overcoming being a resident, to tell you the truth, and showing that I had the perspective, which is my perspective, that the goal of our organization was to create and advance the notion of a business district. And of course, that is really the center of Lower Manhattan. With respect to being a woman in this business, I think the pressures are internal because, of course, you've got work, which is consuming, you've got domestic responsibilities, which are consuming, and how do you put it all together? The good news is I have a 2-block commute. But I think my personal issues really track the issues of our district. That the notion of work is really, really changing. It is not 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And the issues of home and home management and parents and children and spouse and family are also increasingly large. How do you put it all together? I don't know. Ronnie, how do you put it all together?
I don't know. You just do it, I guess.
Right.
I think you have certain rules. Children come first, right? I mean, that's the only call that you'll be interrupted for in an important meeting.
I think the best story is my kids were very taken with the fact that I'm the president.
Yeah.
And in fact, it was reported in the New York Times that I got the job and that I was president. My son, who's 8 years old, said to me, "Mom, if you're president, are there term limits?" And I really hope there aren't, because I love this job. I love the chance to make a difference in the community. I think it's a responsibility to be a public figure. And I think in some ways being a woman liberates me from the traditional notion of what it means to be a business leader. And I think
that's very true.
And I think I hope I have managed to turn my experience, which is in government and the community, into an asset. I'm about bringing people together. I'm about solving problems. I'm about finding solutions. Sometimes they're about commercial real estate. Sometimes they're about community planting. We had 200 people coming together to help us do the spring planting in Wall Street Park. People who lived there, people who worked there, even a couple of tourists who didn't know what was going on. Why did we do that? So everybody knows why they are downtown.
They're very lucky to have you, I think.
Right.
Did you find find when you came, and you have a large staff, don't you?
I do.
That you have what I always called a woman's perspective to the different policies? I mean, there is a slight difference in the way you look at something, isn't there? Especially with the fact that you live there and your children. I mean, that's really what you're saying. Does it affect the way you do business within the alliance?
Well, it certainly takes me longer to get dressed in the morning, and I mean that seriously, because I'm very, very focused on how I present the image of the bid. I think women who have worked their entire professional lives, and I've worked since I was 17 years old, I think they're both more compassionate, and I think they're more dismissive, because we know what it's like to have to go home and make dinner. We know what it's like when your kid gets sick. We also know how hard you have to work, and I don't have a lot of respect for people who aren't putting the job first, contextualized in their life, as I do. But I'm very fortunate. I have a fantastic staff, smart, hardworking, passionate, committed people.
And a great constituency, I would think, from listening to this.
But I think if women are different, women have to be problem solvers. And they've always been problem solvers, and I think I bring that to the table.
Well, I think the Downtown Alliance is most fortunate to have you, and thank you very much. If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.